For the last several months, I've been investigating the deaths of detainees in U.S. immigration custody under the Trump administration. In the last 13 months since Donald Trump took office, there have been 42 of these deaths, which have occurred at facilities all across the country. Just to get ahead of what I know DHS's response has been and will be to the story that is out today at The Guardian, I'd like to note that some of the people whose deaths I've investigated in the last few months had no criminal history or had criminal histories that included relatively minor offenses like DUIs. DHS very much likes to point out the criminal histories of anyone who dies in immigration custody. In fact, it typically leads their press releases on these detainee deaths. But set that aside for a moment and let's take a step back and think about what we've seen and heard about the circumstances of these deaths. Unfortunately, there hasn't been a lot on this issue. There's been some great reporting out there about individual cases like Xiaofeng Zhe, who was an immigrant who died in custody in Pennsylvania, who supposedly killed himself. Scripps News obtained an autopsy report showing he had his hands and his arms tied behind his back at the time of death. That case has sort of weirdly just died. As far as I'm aware, there's no wrongful death lawsuit or any further investigation of it, which is actually kind of in line with what I've found over the past several months of looking into these deaths. Like I said, there's been 42 of them, so I started by trying to obtain autopsy reports for all of the people who have died in immigration custody under the Trump administration. It's taken months and hundreds of dollars and things like money orders and snail mail letters and official requests for autopsy reports as a member of the media to obtain a little over 24 autopsy reports. Now, these reports are key to understanding the circumstances and the official cause and manner of these deaths. You might remember a few months ago when an immigrant died at Camp East Montana, which is a hastily constructed tent facility on Fort Bliss in El Paso that holds thousands of immigrant detainees. Now, initially, ICE said that the man had killed himself. Then the Washington Post started digging and found detainees who said that the man had been struggling with guards there. Around that time is when the El Paso County medical examiner, which was conducting the autopsy for that detainee, Geraldo Lunas Campos, found that he had died essentially of asphyxiation. That's when ICE changed its story to, well, he was trying to commit suicide and the guards tried to intervene, and that's when he died. Who conducts the autopsies and what those reports say is extremely important to understanding how these detainees died, which is why I spent so much time and effort over the past several months trying to get these reports. I also spent a lot of time going through reports directly from ICE. ICE is required to release detailed reports of deaths of immigrants in custody within 90 days, according to rules created by Congress. A few months ago, I found that ICE had been violating these rules by not providing these reports within 90 days, but since then they seem to have caught up a little bit and are now mostly complying with that requirement. These reports, in a lot of cases, are very detailed, but they need to be combined with the autopsy reports and things like 911 calls and even interviews with fellow detainees to get the full picture of how someone died in immigration custody. There's a ton of stuff in today's story that's out at The Guardian. There's an additional rundown at my newsletter, American Doom. If I went through all of it, this video would be a half an hour long, and frankly, I really don't have time for that because I'm a little fried, and also there's a lot more investigating to do, and I'm hopeful that this turns into a larger project because I think it's really important work. I want to point out one case that off the top of my head I think is a pretty egregious example of what conditions in these facilities look like and how people with serious medical problems are not well served by being in detention. Francisco Gaspar Andres. His death was the one that occurred just before Lunas Campos, which created this firestorm of controversy over ICE saying he killed himself and the El Paso County medical examiner saying actually it was a homicide. For that, the El Paso County ME conducted the autopsy for Andres. Andres was initially picked up in Florida, where he was detained at the Chrome Detention Center outside Miami. There, he complained of all sorts of issues. Reading the detainee death report from ICE and the autopsy report from El Paso, clearly it looks like Andres was going through some form of alcohol withdrawal. Medical staff found he also had low blood platelets and an inability of one of his heart chambers to close properly. security. Not only did ICE continue to keep him locked up at Chrome Detention Center, they, for some reason, decided to transfer him thousands of miles away to the Camp East Montana detention facility in El Paso. There, his condition worsened. Over the next 2 months at Camp East Montana, Andres complained of a horrific variety of ailments and problems: bleeding gums, rectal bleeding, insomnia, headaches, fever, chills. Over and over again, staff at Camp East Montana, which is run by a private company called Acquisition Logistics, cleared Andres to go back into general population. This went on for a few months as medical staff there noted that he had jaundice and other serious problems. Finally, in November, Andres was allowed to go to a hospital. By the time he arrived there, hospital staff found blood pooling in his liver, renal failure, and sepsis. He was intubated then on December 3rd, a few months after arriving at Camp East Montana, and about 4 months after being picked up by ICE in Florida. By the time he died and his body arrived at the medical examiner's office in El Paso, Andres, who was 48 years old, weighed 123 pounds. I pointed this case out to DHS as part of reporting for my story at The Guardian. They did not provide any response about any of the circumstances that led to Andres' death. Obviously, there's a lot more than just Andres, and trying to get to the bottom of these deaths has taken the better part of the last few months. I'm going to continue on this reporting path. If you want to support my work, please head to American Doom and choose a paid subscription or throw a few dollars my way. You might end up helping me pay for one of the many autopsy reports in my search for answers about the record high number of deaths that are occurring in a detention network that seems to only be getting bigger by the day under the Trump administration.